I watched through my kitchen window as federal agents slapped handcuffs on Sheriff Karen Walsh. Her face twisted with rage as she spotted me standing on my porch. She broke free from the agents for just a moment and screamed across the yard. "You think you won. You destroyed this entire town." I smiled and waved back at her. What she did not know was that I had been planning this moment for 18 months. Every move she made, every illegal decision, every corrupt deal. It all led her straight into my legal trap. And now, 120 illegal homes were about to come crashing down. My grandfather died on a Tuesday in March. I got the call while sitting in my cubicle in Denver, surrounded by the gray walls and fluorescent lights that had become my prison for the past 15 years. The lawyer told me I had inherited something I never expected. 500 acres of ranch land in Pine Valley County, Colorado. I had not been back to that ranch since I was 12 years old. Life had pulled me toward the city, toward what I thought was success. But standing in that stuffy office building, listening to the lawyer describe rolling hills and endless sky, I felt something stir in my chest that I had forgotten existed. Hope. 3 weeks later, I drove my beaten-down Honda through the gates of what was now my property. The sight took my breath away. The land stretched out before me like a green ocean, dotted with ancient oak trees and crossed by a crystal-clear creek. My grandfather's old farmhouse sat on a small hill, weathered but solid, waiting for someone to bring it back to life. That evening, I walked into Murphy's Diner in town, the same place I remembered from childhood. The bell above the door chimed, and every head in the place turned to look at me. Small towns never forget a face, even after 15 years. "Well, I'll be damned," said a voice from the corner booth, "if it isn't little Tommy Henderson." I turned to see a woman in her 40s, wearing a sheriff's uniform and a warm smile. Her badge read K. Walsh, and she had the kind of confident presence that commanded respect. "I'm Sheriff Karen Walsh," she said, extending her hand. "I heard you inherited old Pete's place. Hell of a good man, your grandfather. Hell of a good property, too." We talked for over an hour. Karen seemed genuinely interested in helping me settle in. She told me about the tight-knit community, about how she had been keeping an eye on the property since my grandfather passed, making sure nobody caused any trouble. "You planning to stay permanent?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "That's the idea," I said. "I want to fix up the house, maybe start a small cattle operation like my grandfather had." Something flickered in her eyes, just for a second. Looking back now, I realize it was the exact moment she decided to destroy my life. "Well, if you need anything at all, you just give me a call," she said, sliding her business card across the table. "I mean it, anything." I drove home that night feeling something I had not felt in years. I felt like I belonged somewhere. I felt like I was home. If only I had known that the woman who promised to help me was already planning to steal everything I had inherited. The first time Sheriff Karen showed up unannounced, I thought it was normal. Small-town sheriffs probably checked on new residents all the time, right? She pulled up my driveway in her patrol car just as I was replacing rotted boards on the front porch. "Just wanted to make sure you were settling in okay," she said, climbing out of the car. But her eyes were not on me. They were scanning my property, taking in every detail like she was mapping it in her mind. "How many acres did Pete leave you again?" she asked. 500, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "That's a lot of land for one person to manage," she said. "You thought about maybe developing some of it. Housing market is hot right now." I told her I wanted to keep it as ranch land, the way my grandfather had. She nodded, but I caught her looking toward the eastern boundary of my property with an expression I could not quite read. The second visit came a week later. This time she brought coffee and donuts, acting like we were old friends. But again, her questions felt more like an interrogation than friendly conversation. "You got good water rights with this property?" she asked. "I think so. Why?" "Oh, just wondering. County's been talking about some infrastructure improvements. Better roads, maybe some new development. Course, that could increase your property value significantly." I started to get an uneasy feeling in my stomach. Something about the way she talked about my land made it sound like she knew more about my future than I did. The third visit was when I found the surveyor stakes. I was walking the eastern boundary of my property, checking fence lines, when I spotted them. Bright orange stakes driven into the ground every 50 feet, running in a perfectly straight line across what had been my grandfather's best pasture land. I called Karen immediately. "Oh, those," she said when I described them. "That's probably just the county planning department. Like I mentioned, we're looking at some road improvements. Nothing for you to worry about." Road improvements through the middle of my pasture. Well, sometimes these things change. Tell you what, why don't I come by tomorrow and we can walk the property together? I can explain everything. She showed up the next morning with a folder full of official-looking papers and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "The thing is, Tom," she said, "the county has been planning a major road expansion project for public safety, and unfortunately, the most practical route goes right through your eastern section." "My eastern section has the best grazing land," I said. "I know it's inconvenient, but this is for the greater good of the community. Don't worry, though, you'll be compensated fairly." That night I could not sleep. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. I decided to do some research, starting with the county planning office. What I found made my blood run cold. There was no road expansion project in the county records, but there was something else. A planned housing development called Pine Valley Estates, and the company behind it was Walsh Construction, LLC, owned and operated by the Walsh family. Karen's family. I sat in my kitchen until dawn, staring at those documents, finally understanding what was happening. Sheriff Karen Walsh was not trying to help me settle in. She was trying to steal my land. Karen dropped all pretense the following Monday. She showed up at my door with 2 deputies and a briefcase full of official documents. Her friendly smile was gone, replaced by the cold stare of someone who was used to getting what she wanted. "Tom, we need to talk," she said, pushing past me into my living room without invitation. She spread papers across my coffee table like she owned the place. Eminent domain notices, right-of-way declarations, environmental impact studies, all bearing official county seals and signatures I did not recognize. "As of today, the county is claiming eminent domain over your eastern boundary for public safety road expansion," she said, not looking up from the papers. "That's about 150 acres. My heart started pounding. "You cannot just take my land." "Actually, I can, and I am." She finally looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my blood freeze. This was not just about business for her. She was enjoying this. "You have 30 days to clear out any personal property from the affected area. After that, construction begins." I grabbed the papers and started reading. The legal language was dense and confusing, but one thing was clear. If this was legitimate, I was screwed. "I want to see a lawyer," I said. Corinne laughed. "Good luck with that." She was not bluffing. I called every lawyer in the county. The first 3 said they were too busy to take new clients. The fourth was more honest. "Look, Tom," said attorney Mike Brennan over the phone, "I've known Corinne Walsh for 20 years. She's got connections all over this county. Judges, prosecutors, city council members. Nobody wants to go up against her. So I'm just supposed to let her steal my land. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to be real careful about how you fight this. Corinne doesn't just win cases. She destroys people who oppose her." I hung up and called lawyers in the next county over. Same story. Word had already gotten out that I was persona non grata. That evening, Corinne came back. Alone this time, but somehow more intimidating than when she had brought backup. "How's that lawyer search going?" she asked, leaning against my porch railing like she owned it. "How did you?" "Small town, Tom. Word travels fast." She stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume mixed with the leather of her gun holster. "Let me explain something to you. I've been sheriff of this county for 12 years. I know every judge, every prosecutor, every city council member. They all owe me favors." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. It was my Honda, parked outside Attorney Brennan's office. "I also know where you go, who you talk to, and what you're planning before you know it yourself." My hands started shaking. This was not just corruption. This was stalking, intimidation, abuse of power on a level I had never imagined. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to sign these papers," she said, pulling out another document. "Voluntary sale of property to the county. Fair market value. Clean and simple." I looked at the figure she was offering. It was about half what the land was actually worth. "And if I refuse?" Her hand moved to rest on her service weapon. Not threatening exactly, but the message was clear. "Tom, I like you. I really do. But I've worked too hard building this community to let one stubborn outsider screw it up. You can take the money and walk away. Or you can fight this and lose everything, including things you don't even know you have to lose yet." The way she said those last words made my skin crawl. This was not just about my land anymore. This was about my safety, maybe even my life. After she left, I sat on my porch for hours, watching the sun set over what might not be my property much longer. For the first time since inheriting the ranch, I felt completely alone. But I also felt something else, something that surprised me. I felt angry, and I was not ready to give up. I woke up to the sound of diesel engines at 5:30 in the morning. Through my bedroom window, I could see a convoy of bulldozers, excavators, and dump trucks rolling across my eastern pasture like an invading army. I threw on clothes and ran outside, but two deputies were already positioned at the end of my driveway, blocking my path. "Sorry, Tom," said Deputy Martinez, a young guy I had met at the diner. "Sheriff's orders. You can't interfere with county construction." "That's my land." "Not anymore, it isn't." I watched helplessly as the machines tore into soil that had been in my family for 3 generations. The sound of chainsaws joined the roar of engines as crews began cutting down the massive oak trees my grandfather had planted as a young man. Each tree that fell felt like losing a piece of my soul. By noon, they had cleared 20 acres. The ancient oaks that had shaded cattle for decades were reduced to logs and sawdust. The creek that had run crystal clear for over a century was already turning muddy from runoff. Corinne showed up around 1 o'clock, wearing her uniform and a hard hat like she was some kind of construction supervisor. "How's it going, Tom?" she called out from behind the deputy barrier. "You're destroying everything," I said. "I'm building something better. Progress, Tom. This is what progress looks like." She walked over to where the foreman was operating a surveyor's instrument, marking out plots of land. I realized with growing horror that they were not just clearing space for a road. They were laying out a subdivision. 120 homes, Karen said, following my gaze. Pine Valley Estates, affordable housing for working families. I'm practically a hero. You lied about the road. I adapted the plan based on community needs. That's called leadership. Within a week, concrete trucks were rolling in. Foundation work began on what Karen was calling Phase 1. 40 homes built on what used to be my grandfather's favorite pasture. The same pasture where he taught me to ride horses when I was 8 years old. I spent my days documenting everything. Photos, videos, license plates of construction vehicles, names of workers. I interviewed the few neighbors who were willing to talk to me, learning that this was not Karen's first land grab. She did the same thing to the Morrison family 3 years ago, whispered Mrs. Chen, my nearest neighbor. Claimed eminent domain for a fire station, built a shopping center instead. Why didn't anyone stop her? Who's going to stop the sheriff? She owns this county. Every morning, I watched more of my inheritance disappear under concrete and lumber. Every evening, I sat on my porch, planning my counterattack. Because I had decided that if Karen thought she could steal from me and get away with it, she was about to learn how wrong she was. The turning point came on a Thursday morning when I watched them pour the foundation for house number 50. A young construction worker was taking a smoke break near my fence line, and I called him over. "You guys been working on this project long?" I asked. "Couple months," he said. "Weird job, though. Usually we don't start building until all the permits are approved." "Permits aren't approved." "Boss says the sheriff is handling all that. But I've been doing construction for 10 years, and I've never seen a project this big move this fast without proper paperwork." That night I made a decision that would change everything. If Karen was cutting corners on permits and approvals, then she was making mistakes, and mistakes could be exploited. I opened my laptop and began researching construction law, environmental regulations, and federal oversight of local development projects. I was about to become an expert in things I had never cared about before. Because I had realized something important. Karen might control the local system, but she did not control everything. There were higher authorities, federal agencies, state regulators, people who did not owe Karen Walsh any favors. I was going to find them, and I was going to bury her with her own arrogance. I drove 3 counties over to hire private investigator Sarah Chen. She operated out of a small office above a Chinese restaurant, and she had a reputation for taking cases that other investigators would not touch. "Sheriff giving you trouble?" she asked after I explained my situation. "How did you know?" "You're not the first person from Pine Valley County to walk through that door. Karen Walsh has been on my radar for years." Sarah's investigation took 6 weeks. What she found was bigger than I had imagined. Karen was not just corrupt. She was running a systematic criminal enterprise using her badge as cover. "She's done this to at least 8 other property owners in the past 5 years, Sarah explained, spreading files across her desk. "Always the same pattern. Eminent domain claims, rushed construction, family business profits." The evidence was overwhelming. Forged environmental impact studies, bribed county inspectors, falsified surveys that moved property lines in her favor. Karen had been stealing land and building illegal developments while her deputies intimidated anyone who complained. "But here's the thing," Sarah said, pointing to a stack of documents. "She's gotten sloppy, overconfident, and that's going to be her downfall." The smoking gun was a series of email exchanges between Karen and her brother Dave, who ran the construction company. They discussed bribing county officials, falsifying federal wetlands reports, and intimidating property owners. All in writing, all admissible in court. "How do we use this?" I asked. "Carefully. If we go to local authorities, they'll tip her off and destroy evidence. We need to go federal." Sarah had contacts in the FBI's Public Corruption Unit and the Environmental Protection Agency. She explained that Karen's operation violated multiple federal laws: wire fraud, racketeering, environmental crimes, civil rights violations. "The feds have been looking for a way into Pine Valley County for years," she said. "Your case might be exactly what they need." While Sarah built the criminal case, I focused on the civil side. I hired an environmental lawyer from Denver who specialized in federal wetlands protection. What we found made my heart race with excitement. Karen's construction project was built directly on top of protected wetlands. The creek that ran through my property was part of a federally protected watershed. Every foundation they poured, every tree they cut, every permit they failed to obtain was a federal crime. "This is huge," my lawyer said. "We're talking about potential fines in the millions, criminal charges, complete project shutdown." But the best part was still coming. I discovered that Karen had never actually filed the eminent domain paperwork with the state. She had simply created fake county documents and used her authority to intimidate me into believing they were real. "She doesn't own your land," my lawyer explained. "She never did. This entire development is built on property that legally belongs to you." I sat in my truck outside the lawyer's office, watching Karen's illegal houses being built on my stolen land, and I smiled for the first time in months. She thought she was so smart. She thought her badge and her connections made her untouchable. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for her to walk into it. FBI Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez met me at a truck stop 50 miles outside Pine Valley County. She was young, professional, and intensely focused on the files I had brought her. "This is exactly what we've been waiting for," she said, flipping through Sarah Chen's investigation report. "We've suspected corruption in Pine Valley County for years, but we needed someone on the inside willing to cooperate." "What happens next?" "We build a bulletproof case, and you're going to help us do it." Agent Rodriguez explained that the FBI had been investigating Karen's operation for months, but they needed evidence of ongoing crimes to justify a full investigation. My case gave them everything they needed. "We're going to wire you up," she said. "Get Karen talking about the bribes, the intimidation, the falsified documents. Once we have her on tape admitting to federal crimes, we can move." The thought of wearing a wire terrified me, but I agreed. I had come too far to back down now. Meanwhile, my environmental lawyer filed a formal complaint with the EPA. Within days, federal environmental agents were requesting files from Pine Valley County, the same files that Karen had falsified to get her construction permits. "She's going to panic when she realizes federal agents are asking questions," my lawyer warned. "Corrupt officials always do. That's when they make their biggest mistakes." He was right. Karen called me 2 days later, and I could hear the stress in her voice. "Tom, we need to talk. There's been some complications with the development project." "What kind of complications?" "Federal people asking questions. Environmental stuff. Probably nothing, but I need to make sure we're all on the same page about the timeline of this project." I met her at Murphy's Diner, wearing the wire Agent Rodriguez had given me. My hands were shaking as I ordered coffee, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Look, Tom," Karen said, leaning across the table, "I might have expedited some of the paperwork on your property transfer. You know how slow government can be." "Expedited how?" "Does it matter? The point is, if anyone asks, you need to remember that you voluntarily sold that land to the county 6 months ago." "But I never signed anything." "Yes, you did." She slid a document across the table. It was a property sale agreement with my signature at the bottom, a signature I had never written. "Karen, this is how things work, Tom. Sometimes we have to be creative to get things done, for the good of the community." I stared at the forged document, feeling the wire taped to my chest, and knowing that every word she said was being recorded. "What if I told people the truth?" I asked. Her friendly mask slipped completely. "Then you'd be making a very serious mistake. You see, Tom, I've been building files on you. Did you know you've been driving with expired registration for 3 months? Did you know there's been reports of drug activity on your property?" "That's not true." "Truth is whatever I say it is in this county. I could have you arrested right now on any number of charges. Plant evidence if I need to. Ruin your life completely." She leaned closer, and I could see the pure malice in her eyes. "Or you can play along, keep your mouth shut, take your money and disappear, your choice." That night, I met Agent Rodriguez at the same truck stop. She listened to the recording with growing excitement. "Conspiracy, fraud, extortion, abuse of power under color of law," she said. "We've got her." But I had one more card to play. The EPA investigation had uncovered something that made all of Karen's other crimes seem small by comparison. The wetlands report was completely fabricated, my environmental lawyer explained over the phone. They claimed the creek was seasonal runoff. It's actually a year-round waterway that feeds into the Colorado River system. This development is built on some of the most protected wetlands in the state. What does that mean? It means every day those houses remain standing is a federal crime, and Karen Walsh is personally liable for every violation. The trap was complete. Federal agencies were closing in from multiple directions: criminal charges, environmental violations, civil rights abuses, financial crimes. Karen had built her empire on corruption and intimidation. Now that empire was about to collapse around her. And I was going to be there to watch it happen. It happened on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:15. I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching Karen's illegal construction crews start another day of destroying my family's land, when the convoy arrived. 6 black SUVs came up the county road like a military operation. FBI, EPA, Colorado State Police, U.S. Marshals. The badges and agencies I had spent months contacting were finally here. The construction workers saw them first. Hammers stopped swinging. Bulldozers shut down. Within minutes, the entire worksite went silent as federal agents swarmed the property. I watched Agent Rodriguez approach the foreman with a stack of papers. "This is a federal shutdown order," she announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "This construction is taking place on illegally seized land over protected wetlands. All work stops immediately." That was when Karen arrived. Her patrol car came screaming up the road with lights flashing, and she jumped out like she was responding to an emergency. But when she saw the federal agents, I watched her face go through a series of expressions: confusion, anger, and then pure terror as she realized what was happening. "What the hell is going on here?" she demanded. walking straight up to Agent Rodriguez with her hand resting on her service weapon. "Sheriff Walsh, I'm FBI Special Agent Rodriguez. We have federal warrants to shut down this construction and investigate multiple violations of federal law." "Federal law? This is a county project. You have no jurisdiction here." Agent Rodriguez smiled. "Actually, Sheriff, when you build on protected wetlands using forged federal documents, it becomes very much our jurisdiction." I could see Karen's mind racing, trying to figure out how much the feds actually knew. She looked around at her construction crews, at the federal agents photographing everything, at the state police officers standing by to make arrests. Then she saw me sitting on my porch and our eyes met across the field. For just a moment her mask of authority slipped completely and I saw the real Karen Walsh. Desperate, cornered, dangerous. "Tom," she called out, walking toward my property line. "Tom, you need to tell these people that you sold this land voluntarily, that all the paperwork is legitimate." I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had brought us to this moment. "Actually, Karen," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I think it's time I told the truth." Agent Rodriguez was already walking toward us with a tape recorder. "Mr. Henderson has been cooperating with our investigation for the past 3 months, she announced, "including wearing a wire during your conversation about forged documents and planted evidence." The color drained from Karen's face. You recorded me." "Every word," I said. "The bribes, the threats, the forged property sale, all of it." Karen's hand moved toward her weapon, but 3 federal agents were already moving to intercept her. She realized she was surrounded and outnumbered. "You have no idea what you've done," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "This town, this county, everything I built here, you're going to destroy it all." "The only thing I'm destroying is your criminal empire," I said. That was when the EPA agents approached with their own set of documents. "Sheriff Walsh, you're under arrest for violations of the Clean Water Act, conspiracy to commit fraud and destruction of protected wetlands," announced Agent Sarah Kim. "You have the right to remain silent." As they read her rights, Karen kept staring at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Tom. Even if they arrest me, you'll never be safe in this county." "Actually," said Agent Rodriguez, "it is over. We've also arrested your brother Dave, County Inspector Bill Morrison, and Judge Patricia Hayes. Your entire operation is finished." They led Karen away in handcuffs while news crews filmed everything. The woman who had terrorized me for months, who had stolen my land and threatened my life, was finally being held accountable. But the best part was still coming. As the federal agents continued their investigation, they discovered that Karen's construction project violated so many laws that the houses would have to be completely demolished. All 120 of them. My land would be restored to its original condition at the county's expense, and Karen Walsh would be paying for it from her prison cell. Justice had finally arrived in Pine Valley County. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 2 full days, telling the jury exactly how Sheriff Karen Walsh had systematically stolen my land, threatened my safety, and corrupted every level of local government to enrich herself and her family. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the forged documents, the falsified environmental reports, Karen's own emails discussing bribes and intimidation tactics. Her defense attorney tried to paint her as a public servant who had made some procedural mistakes while trying to bring affordable housing to the community. The jury saw right through it. They found her guilty on all counts: conspiracy, fraud, extortion, abuse of power under color of law, destruction of protected wetlands. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in federal prison and ordered her to pay full restitution for environmental damages. "Ms. Walsh," the judge said during sentencing, "you took an oath to protect and serve your community. Instead, you used your badge to enrich yourself at the expense of the very people you swore to protect. Your actions represent a betrayal of the public trust that cannot be tolerated." Karen showed no remorse. Even as they led her away in shackles, she glared at me with the same hatred I had seen that day when the federal agents arrested her. But I was not the only one who got justice that day. The Morrison family, whose land Karen had stolen 3 years earlier, filed their own lawsuit and won a settlement of $2 million. 6 other families came forward with similar stories, and each one received compensation for Karen's crimes. The Walsh family construction company went bankrupt, paying legal fees and restitution. Dave Walsh, Karen's brother, received 3 years in prison for his role in the conspiracy. County Inspector Bill Morrison was sentenced to 18 months for accepting bribes. Judge Patricia Hayes lost her position and her law license permanently. The entire corrupt network that Karen had built over 12 years of being sheriff was dismantled in a matter of months. And then came the day I had been waiting for. The demolition crews arrived on a crisp October morning. The same federal agents who had shut down Karen's illegal construction project now oversaw its complete destruction. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching bulldozers tear down the houses that had been built on my stolen land. Every falling wall was a victory. Every pile of debris was justice served. It took 6 weeks to demolish all 120 homes. The county was required to restore the land to its original condition, replanting trees and rebuilding the creek banks that had been destroyed. By Christmas, my eastern pasture looked almost exactly the way it had when my grandfather was alive. The ancient oaks were gone forever, but new saplings had been planted in their place. In 50 years, they would provide shade for cattle the way their predecessors had. I used the settlement money to rebuild my grandfather's ranch house and start the cattle operation I had always dreamed of. The same land that Karen Walsh had tried to steal became the foundation for a new life I had built with my own hands. Sometimes at night, I sit on my porch and look out over the pasture where Karen's illegal houses used to stand. The land is peaceful now. The creek runs clear again. The stars shine down on open fields instead of suburban rooftops. Karen Walsh thought she could use her badge and her connections to steal my family's legacy. She thought she was untouchable. She was wrong. Sometimes the good guys really do win. Sometimes justice really does prevail. And sometimes, if you are patient enough and smart enough, you can build a trap so perfect that your enemies destroy themselves.